So we hear a lot in rehabilitation for shoulder injuries about rotator cuff damage, rotator cuff strengthening, the requirement to have a strong rotator cuff. The first thing we need to understand is that the shoulder joint is a really shallow ball and socket. So think of a golf ball sitting on a tee. I can take that golf ball and spin it all around, but it's really easy to knock right off of that tee. Same thing with the shoulder joint. We can spin that shoulder all sorts of different directions, but it's really easy for it to start to knock off. So what we have to do is use our rotator cuff, which is a group of 4 muscles that act like muscular saran wrap. So imagine that ball sitting on top of the tee, and we have muscular saran wrap holding that thing in position. Now, when we have that muscular saran wrap holding that thing there, it can still spin around, but it stays in a nice stable position. So the way that rotator cuff works is we want to keep it as neutral as we can. If a muscle gets too long or a muscle gets too short, it can't stabilize quite as well. And so what will happen is then one side will be too long, the other side too short, and the joint will start to get unstable, potentially dislocate, or at least shake around and damage the joint that way. So the way that position happens to be is wherever our elbow is, our shoulder blade needs to follow. And so if my elbow is forward like the top of a push-up, I need my shoulder blade forward. I don't want to stop the push-up here. If I'm at the bottom of a pull-up, my elbow is up. I don't want to be here. I want that shoulder all the way up. Same thing with a shoulder press. As I press up, my elbow goes high. I want to make sure I'm getting that shoulder blade to follow it right along with it. Does that make sense to everybody? So a lot of times we'll see strengthening activities for the rotator cuff. And a really popular one is external rotations, sometimes done with a dumbbell, just like so. Okay, sometimes done with rubber bands against the door with your elbow in tight, sometimes against the door with it coming up this way. The idea is to strengthen what they call the external rotators of the rotator cuff, to get the backside of that cuff a little bit stronger. Functionally, that's not the way our body was built to work. It was built to keep that shoulder stable by putting the shoulder blade in the right position no matter where we are. And so not to create movement, but to prevent movement of that shoulder joint itself. So one thing we're going to start working into our programming is muscle snatches. We've already been working on single arm farmer carries, which do a really great job of helping to start to strengthen that rotator cuff. Just holding that joint in position when you have 100, 200, 300 pounds pulling on the shoulder and the cuff is holding it in place, really strong there. We do one-arm sumo deadlifts. Then from there, one-arm sumo deadlift high pulls. And so as I go up, I want that elbow coming up and I want the shoulder blade coming up right along with it. One thing we'll see is the elbow will start to drop and will drop back here instead of getting that shoulder blade up in the position there. And so what we're looking for as they pull is that internal rotation, which actually strengthens the external rotators in a long position, just like so. So we get that improved position. Now, when this drops back, what ends up happening is we start to put the greater tubercle, which is the attachment of the rotator cuff, one of the rotator cuff, the supraspinatus, the attachment of that bangs into the top of our shoulder blade, a piece called the acromion process. That banging creates what we call an external impingement. And over time, it nicks and wears and nicks and wears. That's where we start to get some rotator cuff tears. Not necessarily from a weak rotator cuff muscle, but because we're poorly positioning it when we're doing certain activities. So with these folks, we're looking for the elbow to go high, the shoulder blade to go high with it, and the sumo deadlift high pull. Now, that gets those external rotators strong there. To mimic that external rotation with the rubber band, we're going to continue that all the way through into a muscle snatch.